1.5 million in 12 months. I don't care what level of business you're at. That's always something that would be nice to have, right? Whether it's 1.5 million in revenue, whether it's 1.5 million in profits, doesn't matter, right? Well, it does, right? I'd rather have 1.5 million in my pocket than top line revenue, and then all of it comes out in expenses, right? But whatever sounds like a big leap for you, that's what we're talking about today. And my goal is by the end of this talk for you to be absolutely certain that there is a path for you to be able to create $1.5 million into your firm's life this year, 2025, before the year is out. So you've got 11 months, we can do it. So let's jump in and talk about what this might. How to step into the new way without fear. And this is a picture of my family. For those of you who don't know, I am very much a family man. I spend 2 days a week with my two babies who are pictured in my arms and my wife's arms in this picture. The three young men on the right of your screen are my sons-in-laws. The three young ladies all the way on the left are my daughters. The really young one in between them is my wife. And then we've got our four little ones. And we've got a busy household. We've got busy lives. And I'm a business owner just like you. And many firm owners have this struggle, right? Like I've got all this balancing to do. I've got this whole balancing act that I need to be a part of. What, how do I navigate that, right? And I'm here to tell you that it can be done, and I'm going to show you how. This is a little bit about me. I have my MBA from DeVry University, Keller's Graduate School of Management. I'm the host of the Law Firm Growth Summit. I'm also the host of the Profit with Law podcast, and I am a Profit First professional, as well as an IRS enrolled agent. We run a business that does all kinds of things to help you grow your law firm. So whether you're a solo, just growing beyond your solo roots and trying to hire an attorney, grow beyond yourself, trying to go from 400,000 to 1 to 2 million. We've got a coaching program that we support people with there. If you are if you're 2 million plus in revenue, we do fractional CFO services where we help law firms unlock a massive profitability that they aren't able to achieve on their own. And if you are any business of any size and any type, we do tax planning and tax preparation for you. We do not do bookkeeping services, and we try to stay away from payroll. We use a third-party payroll provider. But all of these things are things that will help you unlock massive growth for yourself, massive personal income potential for yourself. And if you were in my talk this morning, you know that that is the story of why I do what I do. And if you missed that, you can go back and watch the recording of that, where I share what motivated me to start working with lawyers and Profit with Law and that whole journey. So let's talk about typically how is a law firm started? What does a typical law firm look like? So a typical law firm owner has a skill set, right? I'm really good at being a PI attorney. I'm really good at being a family lawyer. Or I just graduated school and I think I'm good at these things, right? So what do? You hang a shingle, you start your own firm, and you set out to do this process, to create this law firm. And what do? You spend a year figuring out how to get clients. You spend another year figuring out how to say no and focus on one practice area. You spend another year figuring out how to serve clients efficiently. And then spend a year figuring out whether he or she needs to hire help. Spend a year figuring out how to hire somebody, train them, etc. Spend a year or two deciding to fire their bad hire. This is a lot of years, right? And this is what happens in a typical
setup where I start my firm because I'm the attorney, and then I need to figure all this stuff out. And it takes a lot of time, right? So what did I do? I just spent the first 5 years getting to the point where I'm a maxed out solo.
Then we spend the next 5 years trying to figure out how to go from 200,000 to $1 million in revenue. So then you spend another 5 years, and this is for those of you who haven't yet achieved $1 million, this is just your future, right? Another 5 years to go from 1 million to 3 million with 10% profit margin. Steven says 2 weeks. Good for you, Steven. Maybe you did what I'm going to show on this talk. Spend another 5 years going from 1 million to the 2 to 3 million with a 10% profit margin, right? So there's a ton. I mean, like 90% of law firm owners in excess of 2 million in revenue that I come in contact with are running at a profit margin of 15% or less, right? Which means if you're doing 3 million in revenue and you're doing a 15% profit margin, you made $450,000. Now that might sound like a lot, but when you're done with paying taxes, you're down to 200 and change. And that's with all the work that went into it. And that's after we just said took you, 10 plus years to get there. You finally unlocked income of 200 something thousand dollars post-tax. What we do on our fractional CFO side of our business is we help business owners figure out how to unlock more profit. They should be running at 30 to 40% profit margin. And if we can double their profit, double their take-home pay, and we do that often in a single year, but maybe it takes two, we can unlock a significant amount of income for them, right? Now, I don't want you to get lost in that. I just want you to realize that that's not the end of the journey, because the end of the journey is getting to that 30+% profit margin. The end of the journey is I finally figured out not only how to bring in the revenue, but I've also figured out how to take home the profit. The typical law firm owner takes 20 years on average to achieve this result. 20 years. My argument to you today is that we can do it in one. So let's talk about how. Let me show you. So an owner is an investor. Think of buying a franchise like a 7-Eleven, right? Everyone knows what a 7-Eleven is, right? When does it make revenue? On day one. When is it profitable? On day one. How does one go about starting it? That's a really good question, right? So if you buy a franchise like a 7-Eleven, you're buying an already proven system and process, right? You're buying you're buying into a franchise where they teach you how to run the business so that when you open your doors, you are making money on day one. Think of buying an already established business: car wash, laundromat, landscaping, auto repair. There's a book called Main Street Millionaire by Cody Sanchez. I don't know how many of you have found her on YouTube, but I love watching her stuff. I mean, really interesting stuff. And I recently read her book. But the idea behind her book is that you can get started as a business owner in any of these businesses with no capital. Because so many businesses that are trying to sell are happy to just be able to sell their business, that they're happy to do it with seller financing. Now, the purpose of this talk is not to tell you to go buy a car wash or a laundromat, although that would not necessarily be a bad idea. But we're gonna now turn this back to your law firm. So there's a good shot of me, right? But think of me, right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm a non-lawyer. So if I were to go to Arizona, where there's a sandbox project that allows non-lawyers to be equity owners of a law firm, right? If I were to go to Arizona and start a law firm, who would I hire? Let's see if anybody can guess. And for those of you who saw me do this talk before, you already know the answer, but in chat, tell me, if I start a law firm, I am not a lawyer, I start a law firm, who do I need to hire on day one? Richard. Money answer, Richard. Melissa got it too, right? An attorney. James as a marketer. James, you're not wrong, but I cannot sell my services. I cannot take in a legal client if I don't have a lawyer to produce the work, right? So if I'm an investor starting a law firm, I'm not an attorney, I would not be approaching it from the lens that all of you are approaching your business. I would not be approaching it from the lens of, okay, I'm going to do the work. I'm not going to do the work because I can't. I'm going to hire somebody who could do the work. Same thing if I bought an accounting practice and I'm not in accounting, or if I bought a doctor's office and I'm not a doctor. Now, these might be bad examples because there's regulations, regulatory things around them. I might not be able to own them, but take I don't know, a tanning salon. I buy a tanning salon. I don't know the first thing about tanning. I'm going to hire somebody who's going to tell people how to lay down in the bed and get tan, right? So the first person I would hire is an attorney. And that should now start to get our wheels spinning. How would I market the services? If I hired an attorney, I was paying $120,000 salary on day one. What would I, as an investor, do to make sure that that attorney's busy? I'd put up some cash, right? Put up some cash for the marketing. How long would it take me to generate $1 million in revenue? Well, let's put this in perspective. Let's just say that if you have a law firm and you have an attorney on staff, depending on the practice area, okay, the only exception to this challenge right now would be if it's a litigation practice and they're charging hourly. But in any other place where I could charge flat fee, or I could have a mix of flat fee and hourly, an attorney should be generating more than $1 million in revenue if they're fully busy, right? So for me to get to $1 million in revenue is simply how quickly can I get my attorney to be working 6 hours a day productively, because that's when a full-time attorney is fully productive, 1,400 hours a year. So let's just say estate planning, right? If I did estate planning, probably 20 clients is all I need a month. Now it's just a math equation. But would you agree that if you were to buy a law firm that's generating $1 million in revenue annually, and let's say it's generating a $200,000 profit, and let's say that you need to pay $400,000 to buy that firm, right? Or $500,000. Would you agree that if you bought that firm, you would be at $1 million in revenue on day one? I think so. So how would I grow that business and increase profitability is the question that you need to ask yourself if you're buying a firm. It doesn't have to be at $1 million, but if it's an established firm, then you can build on the previous owner's work. How long would it take me to generate $1 million in personal income? So I told you 30% is the threshold of healthy profit. This is a math equation, right? Do $1 million divided by 0.3. And what you come up with, between $3 and $4 million in revenue, that's what it's going to take to have $1 million in personal income. We can get into the tax conversation and we can increase that, right? So make it 5 million if you want $1 million after tax. So how I would build a law firm is I would assemble a team. Because without having somebody in place to do the legal work, without having somebody in place to get me clients, without having somebody in place to sell them, without having somebody in place to bill them, the wheels are not going to turn. So when you are building your firm, you start with you and you figure out, how do I fill my plate? And you're going to see that you work backwards. So the way I would do it, I would assemble a team, put the office, technology, and risk protection in place, make sure I have insurance, make sure I've got some basic systems and processes that, balls not being dropped, and then hit the marketplace, start doing my marketing, sales, get clients, fill their plates. Now, the amount of time that it takes to be ready to sell to clients and bring them in, it doesn't have to be very long. So I'm not out the money for that team I assembled for very long. 3 months is probably stretching it, 4 months, and then it starts to cash flow itself. So hire an attorney. What would I do to hire an attorney? Well, number one, I don't need a project. I don't need somebody who needs to learn on the job. I need somebody who can hit the ground running and do legal work on day one and knows what they're doing, right? So I need at least 5 years of experience in the practice area that we're going to specialize in. The attorney would have to be able to hit the ground running when I bring clients in. And what does such an attorney cost? So I just did a search for stuff for New York, where I live, and came up with these job postings. Just make it really big so you can see it. And you can see these ranges, right? 85 to 115, 80 to 100, 75,000, 110 to 130, 85 to 125, 110 to 130. You get the idea of what such an attorney would cost me, right? So I would hire an attorney with at least 5 years of experience. They'd be able to hit the ground running, and let's use conservative numbers. Let's say that they would command a salary of $120,000. Let's add taxes and benefits to that. They're going to cost me $144,000. Okay? Now, what do you think we need to hire, or who do you think we need to hire to maximize the attorney's billable capacity? So I hire an attorney. Now, if the attorney doesn't have this in place, the attorney is going to not be productive or efficient with their production. You're right, support staff, paralegal, or legal assistant, right? So let's say an offshore VA, okay, we've got Get Staffed Up is one of our sponsors, and Get Staffed Up can do a offshore VA for $2,100 a month. I need to update the slide because at the time I wrote this number down, it was $2,000 a month. So let's say it's $2,000 a month just for this argument. $24,000 a year for a legal assistant, $60,000 a year for a paralegal, but the paralegal stateside, so we have taxes and benefits, so we have to add that up, and that's $72,000, right? Now, these are annual salary numbers. Keep in mind that we're going to have work for them, right? So we don't need to worry about, oh, how am I going to come up with this? But we'll have that conversation. Who else do we need in this picture? We've got an attorney, we've got a paralegal, we've got a legal assistant. What else do we need? We need an office manager or a receptionist. You guys were right. Thank you, Jennifer. You need an accountant. Hire me, right? Office manager, receptionist, $50,000 plus taxes and benefits, right? $60,000. Now, these are ballpark numbers. Depending on where you live in the country, you may need to spend more, you may need to spend less, but we're just going to use these numbers, and you would agree that these are fair assessments, right? I'm not lowballing this, but I'm also not shooting really high. We can consider a salesperson. The owner is going to be the most effective salesperson for the firm until somebody's really trained up, really experienced with, specifically with your clientele. So that's why the owner typically can hang on to the salesperson role if everyone else is doing something else. But we can totally put a salesperson in and just see where the math leads us, right? A salesperson, $80,000 plus taxes and benefits, $96,000, right? So here is the assembly of the team, right? We've got lawyer, $144,000, paralegal, $72,000, legal assistant, $24,000, office manager, $60,000, salesperson, $96,000, all in a payroll of $396,000 a year. Now that sounds like a lot, but if you had a lawyer, if you had a paralegal, if you had a legal assistant, you had an office manager, you had a salesperson, I invite you to start considering what kind of production from a revenue perspective they can perform. We're going to get there. But I just want you to think about that, because I don't want you to start thinking, wow, this is, all right. Let's talk about the rest of our overhead. Rent and utilities, $4,000 a month. Hardware, software, and implementation, $30,000. That's annual. So $4,000 a month is $48,000 annual. Professional services. So somebody said bookkeeper, accountant, Jennifer, this is your line right here. $40,000, right? Now, some of these are high, right? Here I included a business coach. So if you pay an accountant, let's say an accountant's, $3,000 to $5,000 a year. Let's say your business coach is $25,000 a year. Let's say your bookkeeper is 10, there's your 40, right? So that's why that says 40,000. You're not necessarily hiring somebody in your business for $40,000 for any of these roles. These are probably going to be outsourced. Now, let's look at the revenue side of the picture. Your average revenue per client is $4,500. Now, this is where people get all tied up. They're like, whoa, that's not average revenue for me. Okay, maybe you need to look at your pricing, or maybe we need to look at what is the volume of clients that you can perform. But I can tell you that if you're in criminal defense and you're doing DUIs, you can do 4,500. If you're in estate planning and you're doing wills and trusts, you can do an estate plan with a trust for 4,500. If you're in immigration, you can do a green card application for 4,500, right? You start looking across the board and 4,500 sounds really real, right? Family law is a different animal, but Melissa, who's in this room, knows my opinion there, right? With family law, you break up the engagement into components, right? So what is step one or stage one of going through a divorce? I bet you we can find a component of the divorce process that we're going to charge 4,500 for, and that is just the beginning. They could probably be worth a lot more. This is an illustration that we're trying to fit across the board, so don't get lost in that. But average revenue of 4,500. Capacity of the legal team, 20 clients a month. Now, if you're in criminal defense, would you agree that there's 20 days in the month, one attorney should be able to handle a client a day? If you're in estate planning, would you agree that one attorney should be able to handle a client a day? If you're in immigration, would you agree that over the course of the process of what you've promised to the client, that it won't take more than one day to serve a client who's paying 4,500? So you don't have to, by the way, Melissa, I see your comment. You don't have, and Melissa says 4,500 without children for the beginning of the divorce up to mediation is doable. First of all, the process might be different state to state. So, but I don't want to get lost in the price. I just picked a number that I felt was realistic across many practice areas so that less people would sit through this presentation and say, this is not for me. I can't do this because I'm different. Right? We're trying to just make this work for everybody. And that's why I picked that number. But I don't want you to think that that's the target number, right? It's just to illustrate the example. $4,500 per client, 20 clients a month. Very doable on the price side, right? Projected revenue at full capacity is what? Well, let's say 20 clients a month times 12 months times 4,500. Guess what? It's $1,080,000. $1,080,000. So if I was doing $1,080,000, if I needed 20 clients a month, what would my marketing budget need to be? Well, let's say it's $10,000 per month. Now, if you were just in the previous session with Hugo from Abogados Now, he showed us in one of his client examples that they ran, their regular campaign was costing them $1,200 to get a client, and in the Hispanic market, it was $700. It's possible that if it's costing you $1,200 to get a client and you need 20 a month, that your budget needs to be $20,000, right? It's also possible that we're not getting it all from paid ads, and there's also word of mouth. There's also other initiatives that we can do to get people in the door. So they're not all going to cost the same amount. But just for you, we're going to start with 10,000, but then we're going to paint a scenario where you increase your marketing spend, because this is the place where people feel unsure. They're like, well, just because I'm spending $10,000 a month doesn't mean I'm going to get the results. My point is that if you haven't spent $10,000, you can't judge whether that's going to work or not. What maybe the reason that marketing is so difficult is because we're not spending. Maybe the reason that marketing seems like a struggle, it seems like a struggle to get clients in the door, is because we don't have the money to spend, or we're not willing to make that expenditure. But if you had $1 million in revenue, which is, by the way, to put it in perspective, we're talking about you have $85,000 a month in revenue coming into your business. If you had that coming in, month out, would you have a problem spending $10,000 on marketing? I presume you would all be, no, I wouldn't have a problem with it, right? And I see you concur with me. So let's now look at this again, okay? So revenue of $1 million, and then we've got our team that we assembled, which is 396,000. We have our rent and utilities, our technology, our professional services, that's our overhead, 118,000. And we have our marketing at 10,000 a month, which is 120. Our total expenses all in, 634,000. Our net income, our profit on $1 million, if we did all of these things, is 446,000, which is a profit margin, by the way, of 41%. So what I'm demonstrating to you here is that if you were willing or able to figure out how to assemble a team and invest in marketing, you could produce this result. So seeing this, you should start asking yourself, why have I not been able to do this? Right? We're not done. I told you that we're going to increase your marketing budgets. So let's do that. Let's assume that you're using only expensive pay-per lead marketing like LSAs, PPCs, and you're getting a 5x return on ad spend. So you actually need to spend almost twice as much on marketing. You're spending $216,000 on marketing. So that is for the naysayers in the room. So let's just boost your marketing budget up and say, okay, fine, spend more money on marketing. You won't make 41%. What will? What will you make? 32%. We can almost double your marketing budget and you're still above my holy grail number of 30%. Now, I know this is a very simplified version of a law firm, but you would agree that $1 million in revenue creates a lot of capability for how to serve that $1 million and how to acquire that $1 million. So we need to start recognizing that perhaps we're approaching the problem from the wrong place. We are thinking like an attorney, and we're trying to build from what we can do upwards. And the problem is that you're never going to achieve the level of productivity from a legal perspective, from legal delivery of services, that an attorney on your staff can achieve. Not because they're better than you, but because you're the owner and you're wearing all these other hats. All right, let's look at the numbers for a second. And this is the place where everybody's eyes glaze over, but I want to make a point. The old method that we've painted a picture of that takes 20 years to get to a level of success. This is what it looks like. In the first year, we're doing 50,000 of revenue, we're making 20,000 of profit. Second year, 70,000, 40,000, so on, right? Your margin is higher at the beginning because you don't have any expenses. You're marketing to friends and family, you're going to your church, you're doing the work yourself. So your entire cost is perhaps a one-room office that you're renting, perhaps a little insurance, and perhaps, you know, some office supplies. Right? But then as you grow, as you start to figure this out, you start to hire some people, you start to expand from there, and then your profit margin starts to come down. But you're stepping into this process, and look at the first time, the line that's in bold, line 16, the first time that you're able to hit $350,000 of personal income from your business, 16 years into this journey. Okay, here's the new method. I just laid it out for you. Let's just say in the first year, I spent money on the team and I didn't quite get there, right? Because it took me time to ramp up the team. It took me time to ramp up my marketing spend. So I only had revenue coming in the second half of the year, right? So we only made $400,000 in revenue, but we spent $325,000 because that's what we laid out in our example that we were going to spend. So we lost money, or yeah, we lost 325,000 because we spent, if we just move back a couple of slides, We spent, 730,000. I think I'm using that number. So we lost 325,000, right? Negative 80%. Now, that means that we needed to have $325,000 to make this work. But in year 2, I'm now running at $80,000 months. I'm now running at a profit of $350,000. So when did I make $350,000? In year 16 or in year 2? It's year 2. 14 years we saved with this method, the investor method. Looking at it from a business lens, looking at it from a lens of what does it take to create a firm that is profitable with a meaningful amount of income. Now, the old method, the investor method side by side, just so you can see it again, 5.5 million over 20 years versus 18.2, almost 0.3 million over over that time. Okay, the cost of doing it the old way versus the new way is over $12.7 million of net income over 20 years, right? So on face value, on the surface, there's a $12 million difference between my way, the investor way that I'm trying to show you, versus the old way of building a law firm. Now, let's look at, and here's a nice graph that shows it. I'm just going to jump through that. There's more to the story, right? Time has value. Money invested over time has value, right? So what is the lost opportunity of the money that we could have been making but didn't because we're growing our business the slow, methodical, from the ground up, me as the primary person, right? The old method, right? What is the cost of not doing it the way I'm showing you, the investor way? Let's assume that you invest the difference in income. Every year we say, this is the new way, this is the old way, here's the difference. Every year that there's extra, we invest it. And we get a 10% annual return over time. After 20 years, you would have over $30 million, not $12 million. Okay? And here is the math. Not every year is there extra money. So you can see return on prior year is there isn't amount to invest. There isn't always an amount to invest. As a matter of fact, in year number 1, there's a negative amount. But in year number 5, there's nothing. But we start to invest every single year, and what does that do? It creates a massive amount of money over time. So if I haven't convinced you yet that this is the shortcut, this is the cheat code, why is nobody doing this? Seems so easy and simple, right? It's very simple. Capital requirement. It costs between $150,000 to $1.6 million to open a 7-Eleven franchise store. It costs an average of $220,000 to get through law school. It costs between $50K and $350K to build a law firm the investor way that I just showed you. And the reason it's $50 to $350 is because you're not investing all that money up front. You're investing 1/12 of it up front, and it's also not all going to be at the same time because you're not going to find and hire all the people exactly at the same time. So you're going to step into it a little bit, but it's between 50 and 350K. So some people have law school sponsored by rich parents. Some people use savings to start a 7-Eleven, but most people borrow money for any of those things. They borrow money on student loans to get through school. They borrow money from everywhere they can to open their 7-Eleven, right? Now, here's the question. Would you borrow $1 million to open a 7-Eleven if you knew that the average annual profit of a 7-Eleven store, starting in year 1, is $1.2 million annually? Would you borrow $220,000 to go to law school if you knew that the average annual lawyer salary is between $69,000 and $98,000? Well, yeah, many of us did, right? Many of the people in the room did that. Would you borrow $350,000, and you don't actually need $350, but let's just say worst case scenario, would you borrow $350,000 if you knew that the average annual income you would produce would be between $900,000 and $1.5 million? The answer is hell yes, right? Like if I would borrow $1 million to get 1.2 annual profit, wouldn't I borrow 350 to get 900,000 to 1.5 million? So where can I access money? So there's all these different kind of places where we could borrow money, right? But let's just, I'm going to breeze through it because we're out of time. Alternative to borrowing is equity partner with cash buy-in. So I could find another attorney to partner with, and they're going to bring some money to the table. Or you can purchase a law firm using seller financing, right? What if you go and find somebody who wants to retire, you buy their firm, an established business, and you just pay them out over time? Or you purchase an aligned business using seller financing that is going to feed you customers into your business. So say you are doing estate planning, maybe you buy a financial advisor business, and the financial advisor business has built into it hundreds of customers for you, right? Or you purchase a business with an SBA loan. I know this is borrowing also, but what if you're not eligible for all those other things that I laid out? You may be eligible to borrow money to purchase a business. So just to wrap this up, if you understand this concept and you're interested or intrigued in understanding how this would work for you, you don't want to try to do this yourself. At Profit with Law, we help law firm owners build their business this way every day in our elite program with our elite fast track. We also help larger firms, which I'm going to cover in just a moment. So Elite Fast Track, real quick, group coaching program, dedicated accountability coach. We work with you to create your business plan, assist you with finding adequate funding to implement your plan, support you throughout the process of implementation, and quarterly planning sessions and weekly coaching calls, blah, 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 right? This is the best sales pitch ever, right? What is the investment for Elite Fast Track? It's an application-only program. You cannot buy it right now. But free strategy session, jump on a call with us. We'll explore your business. We'll help you understand if you're a good fit. And then we can talk about what that looks like. We only have 30 slots in February. So it's your chance to make a huge leap in your business if you want it. And we also help law firm owners generating over $2 million in annual revenue with our fractional CFO services. Our track record is a minimum of 10% profit increase in 12 months, and often doubling the profit of the owner in 1 year, sometimes 2. So if you want to book a one-on-one strategy session with us for either of those two sides of our business, do you want to be one of 20 lawyers that will be earning over $350,000 in profit this time next year? If there's a hell yes, are you willing to invest 30 minutes to get there? Because that's all a strategy session is 30 minutes of your time. We can help you figure out what your best path forward is. So we have limited 30 spots available. Act now if you're serious. That is the end of my presentation, and I really appreciate everybody here being here, and I hope that this was valuable for you.